There is a place, not here or there, but somewhere in between. There is a space in the thin air that really can be seen. If you listen and observe, you may be surprised. Some may call it Camelot or even paradise. Some may say you cross a bridge, others through a door. But all I know about this place is that I call it evermore. Evermore. Good evening, sweet spirits. Welcome to the show. My name is Suzanne Sorrell, and I'm the producer and host of the Evermore Paranormal Network. On this episode, we're doing something special. It's called a Ghost-A-Thon. So sit back and enjoy the show.
My name is Melissa Leeper. I'm a paranormal researcher. I've been investigating in the field for around 20 years. I'm here today with Chris Hammond, who's a longtime investigative partner of mine. He's been on my team for around 15 years. And we do a lot of public speaking around the United States. And Chris specializes in, as a motivational speaker, helping people deal with problems of addiction and the inner battles that this type of thing can create. And he's here to talk to you a little bit about what he does for people in that area.
So I should start out by saying that I am an addict, recovering addict, and that's kind of what got me into the paranormal. So, and it also took me down a really dark path that had my life messed up for a long time, but it all came out good. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, you know, when Chris came to me, you know, a friend of a friend, I heard, you know, through the grapevine that he was out doing some paranormal investigations on his own. We're from a very small town, so naturally, this kind of thing's going on. I'm going to be the first person they tell about it. That's
Right.
what happened. And he was interested in joining a team. So they talked me into meeting with them, and I gave in.
It was
since
love
I
at
figured,
first
well,
sight.
you know, it was what?
Love at first sight.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Still is. But anyway, I agreed to take him on since I figured, well, he's going to be out there doing it by himself anyway. And some of the stories that he was sharing with us were, you know, I recognized them as some of the local lore, only he had experienced some of it personally. And then he shared some of his audio that he had collected in our local areas, cemeteries and whatnot, what most people start out doing in the paranormal
Right.
field, any place they can go to try and collect that evidence. Well, it turns out he was pretty good at it. And he was attracting a certain type of spiritual communication that I was extremely familiar with, which is a big red flag for me. So naturally, being a more seasoned investigator than him at the time and a founder of a group there, I felt, you know, somewhat of a responsibility. And I had a great interest in, you know, how somebody comes out of nowhere with this type of skill. And I was curious as to what it was that attracted, you know, so many different types of spirits to be so blatantly communicative with him. And then we, you know, I discover through time that he's got a great sensitivity, is very sensitive to this type of thing. And it seemed like, through these certain types of spirits, I could recognize them for what they're attracted to. And I didn't find out, really until after working probably a year with you,
Yeah.
that you had, any type of problems with drug addiction at all. And then once we did, we realized that these dark places that you were going, well, they recognize that type of thing. I never noticed any weakness in them until just a great sensitivity, until, you had he suffered some great loss in his life, some great losses. And through then, I think really became your most trying times in that inner battle that you had to deal with.
Yeah. So I lost my gram. Then a few years later, I lost my mom, my aunt, and my stepdad, all within a 2.5 year time. And I was well into my addiction at this point, trying to start the road to recovery. And it's not really that easy to do, but especially with everything going on, the loss of my family. I felt alone. I felt like an orphan.
And through that deep emotional state, a dark place became much darker and started to manifest in ways that would, could lead a soul on to a real path of destruction.
Yeah. I started noticing dreams I was having where I was doing battle with demonic entities in my house, in my aunt's old house that she hadn't lived there for 20 years, but it was like an almost every night thing for a good year or more, where I would wake up in the middle of the night sweating because I had a dream that I was doing battle with this demonic force that you couldn't see, and it felt real, like it felt like it was real life happening. So of course I would call Melissa and tell her all about the dreams.
A lot of people did like to call Melissa and
Right.
tell me about these dreams, and I understand this coming from my point of view as an investigator. I'm also, not just a paranormal investigator, but I'm one that focuses mainly on demonology and the darker side of the paranormal.
Right.
And for reasons of my own. So I had some insight to that. And I could see that we might be heading towards a oppressive situation where he was at a pivotal moment in his life where these things could really defeat him. So he was literally at a fork in the road, and it was time to make a choice. But typically I would suggest to people, if they were a client and not my partner, that you dismiss yourself from, paranormal investigation and try and turn your life away from that
at
darkness.
that point, I was going off to these bigger places that, like the asylums or the penitentiaries, and doing ghost hunts.
He was a thrill seeker that way,
Yeah.
too.
Eventually, what happened after the dreams, like I started noticing things in my home were going on.
If they started manifesting in your reality.
Yeah, like my aunt passed away. I lived with my aunt at the time, and she passed away in that house, and it was a day, well, it was maybe a week after she passed away. In the middle of the night, I heard her in her voice saying Christopher, which that's what she called me. I figured it was her, so it was no big deal. And then a week or two later, I went up my steps, and it felt off. It didn't feel right. I can't explain it. It's just
As if like the feeling you had in the dreams
Yeah,
with that
yeah.
that force that you felt there was present in, you know, the light of day.
right. So I didn't go upstairs. I went back downstairs, and all the lights in the house were on. And I slept downstairs with all the lights on. It scared me. It freaked me out. And it bugged me because I was going into these places where crazy activity happens. But then it happens in my house, and it scared me. So I was kind of lost. I didn't know what to do at that time.
Yeah, it's one thing to, you know, be the thrill seeker and get a real, you know, excited about extreme activity in large groups of people in public places, in the old asylums and the empty buildings. That's where that stuff belongs. But once it hits you on a personal level in your personal space and you start fearing the dark in your own home,
Right.
it becomes a wake-up time. And I think you realize that you're facing your own darkness, your own inner darkness, your inner demons.
Yeah.
And maybe this is not just an outward manifestation of some scary movie you watch, but this is something that is really attacking you from the inside out. And then your awareness of this is what became your success.
Right.
Because knowledge is power.
Well, after when everything started happening in the house, I went into a really deep, dark depression to where I would not leave my bedroom for months at a time. I wouldn't shower for weeks. I wouldn't shave. Like I was a mess.
You were oppressed.
Yeah. I didn't care if I lived or died. I don't want to say I was suicidal, but I didn't care.
You didn't care one way or the other.
Yeah, like I wanted to die, but I was afraid to do it myself. So yeah, it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized I needed to do something. I needed to stop what I was doing and change.
You realized that, you know, this addiction was your darkness.
Right.
So when you realized that, I think that you knew there's no way you could handle someone else's darkness. There was no way you could bring somebody out of the
Right.
dark if you were lost in it yourself.
Yeah.
And it was your will to want to be helpful and to pull people out of this and teach them how to come out on their own. Because ideally that's what has to happen. This is a personal inner battle. And it's a very serious one, especially in today's world. And he managed
A lot of times
to do that.
A lot of times they say you got to hit rock bottom, and that don't always mean like well, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it wasn't a physical rock bottom for me. It was a mental rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized I had to pull myself out, and that's what I did, with a lot of help from my friends. Melissa being one of them, huge support.
I think a lot of people in the Paranormal Network did, because we're a very large network, they didn't, it's not that they really needed to know your story. You didn't
Right.
share this with anybody until, like, what, this year?
Yep, yeah.
It was only this year, and he had a great turnout. There were a lot of people that were very responsive to it. I was very surprised by how many people could relate to this, and they were very, it seemed to bring them some comfort that he had spoken publicly about this very personal situation. And it's ironic to me to come from such a dark place in this, such a inner spiritual battle, to find the real warrior within, and to, you know, grasp for the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, that is, you know, the only way out of darkness. And he became, you know, he's kind of become a beacon for other people now that needed some hope. You know, 20 years down the line,
Right.
some people don't get to reach that point. And it's great that you have this knowledge coming from the deepest, darkest places of the human psyche in physical existence, to staying within those dark corners, and you waltz in there and you take somebody by the hand and help them find their way out. You can't pull somebody out. You can't do it for them.
No, they gotta want. They gotta want to.
They
get
have
out
to
of
want to
it.
do it. And you wouldn't think that paranormal research would be somewhere that would be possible for people, and a lot of times it isn't. It's a catch-20. It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, because I think the paranormal helped get me into that dark spot, but it also pulled me out of that dark spot as well.
Well, you went into it from a dark place anyway.
Right.
You had no idea. This is the point. You didn't know that being in that
I think
oppressive state was going to attract darker forces
Right.
that you didn't know
That's
existed.
what I was just going to say. That I think that